The second half of the episode. Oh my goodness. I've been talking, I've been reviewing the show, talking about it with coworkers and whatnot. And so far, it's been a slow build. I was talking to one coworker just like a few days ago, and he was like, that he really liked Game of Thrones, but he felt that House of the Dragon was moving along too slowly. I read the book before I started trying to watch the show. And the show is actually based on the second half of Fire and Blood. And that was actually like my least favorite part of the book. I thought the first half of the book was incredible. But when it got to this point, I couldn't tell the characters apart. The names were very similar. And it just seemed to be a lot of siblings fighting over who was going to get the throne and this kind of stuff. Another thing is that dragons feature very heavily in this part of the book. I didn't really care for the dragons in the book. Didn't really care for the dragons in Game of Thrones, because I think they look kind of fake. But I think House of the Dragon is going to become one of those things where it's the exception. Most often, books tend to be better than the TV show or the movie. But I think that might not be the case here. I actually think, now this is comparing apples to apples, meaning not all of Fire and Blood, but the second half of Fire and Blood to House of the Dragon. And I think at this point I can safely say that House of the Dragon, the TV show, is better than the book. And I think that episode 4 of season 2 is a perfect example of this, where the visuals were absolutely stunning. Up to this point, we've seen the dragons, we've seen them riding about and whatnot. But the only fight that we've seen so far has been Aemond versus Lucerys. And that was mostly Aemond chasing down Lucerys and his dragon, pretty much taking a bite out of Lucerys' dragon. This is the first episode where we've actually seen two dragons with their riders equipped and ready to fight, actually fighting. It was incredible. I was on the edge of my seat throughout the fight. For much of the episode, for about the first half of the episode actually, Rhaenyra is nowhere to be seen. But upon her return, she actually walks in while the council is meeting, and her son has kind of taken control of the meeting. And things are kind of getting to a point where it's like they have to have some kind of response at this point, because Ser Cole's army is getting to be quite large, at which point she explains that she'd been to King's Landing, that she accepts, but really just needed to make sure that there was absolutely nothing else that could be done to avert war. The time has come for war and really the dance of the dragons to begin. The first conversation now to be had is they're going to send a dragon. They don't have an army to send at this point. It's just right across the bay. Who's going to go? Rhaenyra steps up that she's not, as leader, going to just sit in the castle in safety and send other people into danger. Her son, Jaehaerys, speaks up and states, well, if you go into battle and you die, that nulls and voids everything else. It's like, what are we fighting for then? And so he volunteers. As his mother, Rhaenyra is not willing to risk his life. At which point, Rhaenyra, who has actually, I think is, if not my favorite character, one of my favorite characters. The reason being, she gives really great counsel, but at the same time is a fighter. Where you think about it, she's given very good advice, I think even better than Daemon, to Rhaenyra. And when push comes to shove, she's also willing to get in there and get her hands dirty. And I feel like I like Rhaenyra, but I think Rhaenyra might actually be my favorite character. I like Aemond as well. I think the two of them might actually be my favorite characters. because Rhaenyra has brains. She's smart, but she's a fighter too, and she steps up and steps forward that she's going to go into battle. And I actually really like the scenes of she's going to do something. And of the people itching to fight, she's really one of the few where it's not about her trying to make a name for herself or trying to achieve glory. Like, she's trying to do the right thing. She's trying to get into the fray before this becomes, to try to stop this before it becomes a bigger problem. While she's gearing up, and, we see, like, they bring out her dragon, and, like, she gives her dragon a hug, and, tells her, well, old girl, we're back at it again. And it's like she could just as easily be talking to herself. On the other side of the divide, we see Aegon gearing up as well, where he sits on the council, but they don't really seek out his input. He's basically a figurehead. Like, all of this fighting and jockeying and whatnot to get him on the throne has really been with the intention of him just being a figurehead. I think that maybe not so much Alicent, but more Hightower's plan was to get Aegon onto the throne and then control him. Tell him what to do, and you're kind of like indirectly sitting in the throne yourself because you're controlling the king. Unexpectedly, who would have thought that Aegon might have actually tried to rule? He decides, well, you know what, if Ser Cole and Aemond are out here plotting and scheming and they're in the fight, Sir Christian Cole, the people are starting to refer to him as being the kingmaker. They're out there in the fight and you're holed up in the castle. The need to try to make a name for himself. And so with that, he gears up to go off into battle. Which, respect to him, because you think about it, like, I actually feel for Aegon, because you have it where he didn't even want to be king. And they pushed him to be king, put him on the throne, and he's trying to do the job. He's really been put in a difficult position where he didn't even want to be king. He was fine with Rhaenyra being king, but they pushed for him to be king, and now that he's on the throne and he's trying to do king stuff, everybody's telling him to just sit there and be quiet, to let them figure things out. It's like they really just want him to be a figurehead. And it's like he wants to be involved. Like, you kind of have to respect that, right? Like, he's not, like, all bad or anything. He's not all good either. But it's like he's on the throne and trying to be king, and no one wants that from him. And we see him gearing up, getting ready to go off into battle. And while this is taking place, Rhaenyra and Jaehaerys are off by themselves. And while he's somewhat upset, she comforts him and begins to tell him, as her father did with her, about the Song of Fire and Ice, this premonition of sorts. Things have to get bad, really bad, and even worse before they get better. And they are kind of the ones that set all of that in motion. And this is taking place while Rhaenyra and Aegon are gearing up to go off into war. But I like the way that it unfolded, where it's like the tension just ratchets up. And you look at it, the scene that opens where it looks like a forest, woods. I don't really know what the difference is between the two. Let's say it's a forest, where we see trees and off in the distance you see a castle. And what ends up happening is, in this scene, we then hear and see two large trees fall. And the camera shifts and we see that there are soldiers between the trees. And they're gearing up to stage their attack on this castle. It's Ser Cole and his army. Alicent's brothers, they're being aggravating as usual, where thus far they've been marching under cover of darkness, right? This is shared by, I think her name is Baela. Where actually Baela calls Rhaenys back to Dragonstone. Like she's there with, Corlys Velaryon at the shipyard or whatever this is. But she's called back because of developments, right? Like she shares from her scouting mission that Sir Criston Cole has amassed an army. They're marching under cover of darkness, and attacking at night and marching through the trees to avoid detection by dragons. But today, they've gathered in these woods outside of this last castle, which is just across the bay from Dragonstone, and they're gearing up for a daytime attack. And also because Aemond and Sir Criston Cole have a plan in place. So we see these trees fall, and I like the way how it leads up, this tension where they're getting ready, they're getting on their marks and whatnot. And they get into position and start to march on the castle. In response, we see archers and whatnot from the castle fanning out and taking up their positions to defend the castle against this encroaching army. And so for a period, you have just regular soldiers and archers fighting back and forth, where the Cole's army, because they're emerging on foot, they have, it looks like, catapults and battering rams in addition to fighters. But because there's some distance and the opposing army is up on the top of this castle raining down arrows on them, they're taking some losses. But yet still they have a large enough host where they can continue advancing. As soldiers fall, other people move forward, and they just keep coming. But Cole and the other officers and some of the soldiers remain back in the trees, right, waiting for the right time. And basically what you come to realize is that there's like several strategies at play, where number one, Daemon is often distracted. He's theoretically the strongest fighter on Team Black. He's often distracted with trying to hold Harrenhal and building an army there. Meanwhile, they've shifted focus from Harrenhal because that seemed like that would be the obvious place for Team Green to attack first. That they have left him there distracted and preoccupied, like he's going to lose his mind and deal with hallucinations there. Like he's fine, leave him there. He's okay for now. And meanwhile, they're marching on this last castle that's just across the bay from Dragonstone. What's going to end up happening? Dragonstone is going to realize, well, wait, they've taken all of these castles. They know that we don't have a ground army. We've got ships, we've got air, we don't have soldiers on the ground. So that's their advantage. They're just across the bay. They're getting closer and closer. We can't attack them on land, so we can send dragons instead, which is exactly what they want them to do. And we see that Rhaenys flies out, and at the same time we see Aegon approaching as well, and the two of them end up engaging in battle. But again, I like the way that these scenes are set up, where it's like, it doesn't just open, it's like, oh my god, this dragon's here and that dragon's there, and they just attack. I like that the first sign of the dragons in most scenes is that from very, very far above, you see the people on the ground where they hear them first, right? And they respond. You see it's like this little thing that comes into the scene, that comes zooming across the sky. And then, everyone takes cover. Everyone runs and scatters. It helps to build up the tension of it. And so often when we've seen dragons so far, it's been just like one dragon. They're not gearing up to fight anyone else. But in this case here, you see Rhaenys and you see Aegon flying towards each other. And what you realize is that Ser Cole and Aemond had a trap set where Cole is going to bring in the army to entice Dragonstone into sending a dragon. And Meanwhile, Aemond is there, but Aemond is hiding out, right? He has Vhagar. And you notice Vhagar is like greenish in color. There's like a big area cut out between some trees, and he's just laying on the ground there, waiting for the dragon to approach. And Rhaenyra arrives, and I actually like the relay of the signal from Ser Cole to Aemond that the dragon has arrived from Dragonstone. And right when Vhagar is about to take off, another dragon approaches. And he has the forethought to say to Vhagar, not yet. Like, just hold tight for a second. Let's see what's going on. And the other dragon ends up being Aegon on Sunfire. No one was accounting for him showing up. And the fight between him and Rhaenyra is epic. You know, with the fire and stuff. I think visually, up close, like the dragons on their own, they still look a little bit cheesy, like they look fake. But I mean, like, what does a real dragon look like? You know? But the fight scenes between them, I think, are actually pretty incredible. And I was worried that, like, they would look really cheesy. But they're actually quite exciting to watch. And, you know, Rhaenyra's laying down fire on the field, you know, attacking Ser Cole's army, but then also doing battle with Aegon was incredible. And the fact that she burnt up like a good amount of Ser Cole's soldiers, you know, not all of them, but a good amount, made like a good dent in his army, which will help in the long term, but then also engaged in battle with Aegon. And it shows, like, you know, her experiences as a dragon rider, that she more than holds her own against Aegon. You know, just like there's one point where it's like the two of them, they're like shooting fire back and forth and whatnot. Like, she flies through the fire, dips down, come from below and whatnot. It was exciting. I liked it. And then here comes Aemond on his dragon. And Aemond is like a savage, though, you know, because you look at it, and again, it's about this thing of infighting between the two teams, where Aemond pops up on the scene, and I was expecting for him and Aegon to, like, gang up on Rhaenyra, but instead, when Vhagar unleashes fire, it's on Aegon. Aemond pretty much attacks his brother. And the thing about it is that, like, the camera shifts, and instead of you see Aemond approach, but the camera shifts and you see Aegon, where he's thinking, here comes my brother to save the day, or to help me out, and you see the realization on his face that Aemond is actually aiming at him. You know, and Vhagar lets forth this, like, ball of fire on him, which injures his dragon. And this is after Rhaenyra's dragon has, like, sliced up Sunfire's chest, abdomen, whatever body part of the dragon that is. And, like, it spills blood all across the field and whatnot. And the dragon is injured, and then here comes Aemond to basically finish him off. And it's like, as goes the dragon, so goes the rider. And so Sunfire, like, plummets to the ground. And the thing about it that I didn't quite understand was that Aemond actually then turned away, you know, like, going off about his business. And Rhaenyra is now in the clear and goes off to some distance, probably to take a breather, but then turns and circles back again, burning more of Ser Cole's soldiers along the way, but then also going after Aemond. And so the thing I didn't really understand was, I take it Aemond wants to be king, so it's sort of this thing on both sides of the second trying to usurp the first, or like the second in line person trying to usurp the ruler, the person with the strongest claim to the throne. And Aemond attacked Aegon, which if Aegon dies, Aemond would, I guess, then be next in line. But then the question is, like, you would still have to worry about Rhaenyra. So why didn't he go after Rhaenys and just, that's one less person on the other team to worry about? He really only went after her when she came after him. And so it's like, it's going to be interesting throughout the rest of the season. First off, Rhaenys basically sacrificing herself. The way that it unfolded was incredible. Where, that whole entire scene was just incredible. And then it's like, the fight between Vhagar and Rhaenys' dragon, where, like her dragon, like the Vhagar, like bites it in the neck. And we see the camera shift again. And I actually think that's a good move that they're making with these dragon fights, where it's like, yeah, show the dragon, but a lot of the energy is going to come from seeing the reactions of the dragon riders, right? Because they're the humans. And you think about it, the way that they showed these two dragons and thus these two riders losing these fights is Aegon's realization that Vhagar was directing the fire at him. His brother had betrayed him. And then Rhaenys wasn't actually injured, but she strapped herself onto the back of her dragon, where basically, not that you jump into safety from such a height, but basically, like, she's riding till the wheels fall off, or I guess till the wings fall off with her dragon. And so when Vhagar attacks her dragon, and it's interesting where the dragon turns its head back to her, which was a similar thing to when they'd taken off. And we see this a few times during the fight, where before they took off, she leaned her head against the dragon and, like says a farewell of sorts. And the dragon looks back at her. They share a moment. During the fight, the dragon looks back at her and they share another moment. And then here we see the dragon looks back, but its eye closes. Dragon's dead. And we see it fall from the sky, but the way that it's shown is that the dragon's eye closes, but we see Rhaenys, not screaming out for help or anything like that, ever so calmly, looking at the camera while her dragon and thus herself plummet to their deaths. Or she plummets to her death because the dragon is already dead. And I applaud it, man. Not the deaths, but the visual of it, I thought was actually incredible. Ser Cole has been injured, right? He'd been knocked unconscious, but he comes to and goes to like tap Alicent's brother on the shoulder, and it's like he's been burnt up by flame. He's now ash. And he goes off in search of Aegon and the dragon because they've fallen from the sky. And in getting there, he sees Aemond. Aemond has his sword drawn. And it's like, he was on the dragon. He wouldn't need to have his sword drawn because there's no fighting going on here. So it would seem that his goal was, if Aegon hadn't died from the fall, from being like hit with fire, that he was going to stab him and kill him with his sword, I'm guessing. But seeing his body broken on the ground and whatnot, and Ser Cole approaches, he sheaths his sword and walks off instead. Cole walks up and sees Aegon, they're dead, and it was like, I don't think that was in the plan. And it's going to be interesting to see where things go from here, because basically it's a matter of, I don't see Rhaenyra and Jacaerys turning on each other, but you look at it, no one else can really trust anyone. There's Alicent and Sir Criston Cole, but That's problematic right there. Larys can't be trusted. He's for himself. And Aegon is now out of the picture. I really don't think that Alicent wants to be bothered with him. So he's a man onto himself.
Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, go ahead and click the thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.